I want, first of all, to say what an honor it is to receive this doctorate honoris causa from Łódź University. It is a privilege to receive this degree from such a prestigious institution, one of the biggest and most popular universities in Poland, and to do it in the day that is a very important day to commemorate education. In particular, I wish to thank the rector, Professor Włodzimierz Nikiel, and the pro-rector in charge of international relations, Professor Zofia Sowinieska. I'd like also to thank the Senate and the Supervisory Committee. I'd like to thank you very warmly for your kind words of laudatio. My father, my mother will have me extremely proud. Let me take this opportunity to pay tribute to some of the most famous alumni of the Łódź University. Some distinguished Polish, such as one of the most important Polish philosophers of the 20th century and first rector of the university, Tadeusz Kotarbiński, former Prime Minister Marek Belka, and current MEPs, my good friend Jacek Saryusz-Wolski, are alumni of the Łódź University. I felicitate this university for producing such talents. I'm also very happy to be in Łódź, a city with an old multicultural tradition, where language, cultures, and religions have mixed. Cultural differences were seen as enriching the city. It is an example for today's Europe. Today I will dedicate my lecture to two issues: some of the main achievements of the European Union in the first decade of the 21st century, and some of the priorities of the external relations of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that when in the future historians look back to Europe at the beginning of the 21st century, they will conclude that the enlargement of 2004-2007 was one of the greatest achievements of European history. In this period, the European Union grew from 15 to 27 member states, unifying the continent in a peaceful way. This was a truly historical event, the peaceful reunification of Europe. To explain its meaning, let me introduce the idea of the pacification process. For those who are familiar with the history of European thought, this notion may remind you of the work of the sociologist Norbert Elias, born in the city of Wrocław. What is interesting in Elias' work is his comprehensive notion of the pacification process. It does not apply only to peace between states, but also to the abolition of illegitimate forms of violence within states and to an internal legitimate political process. Although Europe did not witness a major interstate war since 1945, half of the continent was certainly not pacified in the broad sense. A number of countries lived under foreign occupation, and their citizens suffered violent repression by their own governments. If former Western Europe lived in peace, generally speaking, the so-called Eastern Europe did not, at least if you understand peace as the absence of illegitimate forms of violence. It is appropriate to remember this point when we celebrate the 13th anniversary of Solidarność, the movement that began the pacification process of former Central and Eastern Europe. As Elias reminds us, the pacification process is associated with a triple triumph. The triumph of civil society over a militaristic system, the triumph of the rule of law over arbitrary power, and the emergence of social and political solidarity among citizens. Europe as a whole only achieved this after 1989, and integration into the European Union consolidated that historical triumph. In his late years observing the development of European politics, Norbert Elias concluded that the pacification process could result in, and I quote, an era in which it will no longer be individual states, but unions of states, which will serve mankind as the dominant social unit. End of quote. In fact, the history of Poland illustrates the merits of a union of states. As an individual country, its independence had been threatened by powerful neighbors. In a union of states, Poland today lives in peace, its sovereignty is guaranteed, and its prosperity has clearly grown. Quite dramatically, Elias published the first edition of his seminal work, The Civilizing Process, in 1939, the same year that witnessed the beginning of the greatest tragedy in modern European history. This points to a fact that we must never ignore. Peace, the triumph of democracy, respect for universal rights, is not a linear process. Progress and setbacks are both part of the historical processes. Peace, democracy, prosperity, and social justice are never definitely acquired, even when it seems to be the case. We must always strive to preserve and reinforce them. In other words, as a union of European democracies, we must periodically renew our commitment to our common values. This is what we did with the last enlargement. Countries like Poland fought hard for their freedom and domestic peace. So when they entered into the European Union, the whole continent renewed its commitment to peace and democracy. The accession of 12 countries meant the renewal of the post-1945 European contract. The experience of the former communist countries must be a lesson for all Europeans. Those who once lived under dictatorships know well the value of democracy and freedom. Those who were under foreign military occupation know well the values of peace and cooperation. Those who were condemned to poverty or economic exploitation know well the values of economic growth, social justice, cohesion, solidarity, and open economies and open societies. The return to Europe of Poland and other countries was also the return of Europe's commitment to its defining values and its founding principles. These values and these principles are like flowers in a garden. They need constant, careful tending. We must never take them for granted. Allow me to make a brief personal comment. Coming from Portugal, I know very well the value of living in a post-authoritarian society. I was 18 years old when democracy came back to my country. In my generation, as in other southern countries, the European community was also a symbol of freedom and democracy. Joining it represented also the return to our common European values. And this is the reason why I really feel so sympathetic to Poland and other countries of Central and Eastern European framework, because I understand how important this Europe is for you and for all the other new members. Ladies and gentlemen, an enlarged Europe is also a stronger Europe. And we need a strong Europe to deal effectively with the world outside our borders. To preserve and to improve what we achieved during the last half a century, we need to be able to shape the world around us. Together, European states can achieve results that they could never dream of on their own. The challenge for the future is how to use the power and capabilities we have built up during decades of European integration in order to promote our values and our interests externally. Poland must be at the heart of European Union's foreign relations. As a country that fought so hard for what I've called this pacification process, it has to be at the forefront of efforts to help others who are struggling for progress and development. External relations start at our borders. As such, neighborhood policy and decent partnership are a priority for the European Union, and Poland plays a leading role in this area. The 2008 Polish-Swedish Eastern Partnership Initiative and the communication of the European Commission in December of the same year have provided a framework for a more focused set of relations with our eastern neighbors, namely Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The Eastern Partnership offers these countries a chance of making a strategic choice, a pro-European orientation. In order to achieve this, we offer an institutional framework that brings them closer to the European Union. On the political front, the European Union is committed to active engagement with these countries to reinforce democratic transformation. In economic terms, we want to integrate them as much as possible into the European economy, aiming in the medium-long run to establish a free trade zone and a European economic area from the Atlantic to the Caspian Sea. A stable new Eastern Europe requires the reinforcement of our strategic partnership with Russia. It is a critical partner. We have known some difficulties, but I'm firmly convinced that we have the conditions to reinforce our relations, including through the Partnership for Modernization. The strengthening of Polish-Russian relationship is a crucial condition to improve such a partnership. The Commission welcomes the constructive and leading role of Poland in our relations with Russia and with the other Eastern partners. Moving westwards, the partnership with the United States is an essential relationship for all of us in the European Union. Poland is also at the forefront of our efforts to strengthen the transatlantic relationship. The economic relationship across the Atlantic is by far the largest between any two trading blocs in history. Our bilateral trade relations represent 33% of world trade in goods, 44% in services. We are also united by shared values and common strategic political interests. In November, we will have the annual European Union-United States of America Summit in Lisbon, and I hope it will give a fresh impulse to our transatlantic agenda. Let me finish by quoting a Polish writer who will reflect the idea of Poland's home and being at the heart of Europe. Stanislaw Wyspiański. I have to make a course of Polish language the next time I come to the university, but I understand that you have understood. Stanislaw Wyspiański, in his play Wesele, The Wedding Feast, tells the scene about a poet talking to a young girl. You can seek Poland throughout the whole wide world, young lady, and you will never find her. The girl replies, perhaps searching is a waste of time. The poet, yet there is one small place, just put your hand beneath your breast. Girl, she says, there is something beating, that is my heart. The poet says exactly that's Poland. This dialogue, written in 1991, symbolized Poland as a historical concept, cruelly divided between three empires. After that, the Polish state was restored in 1918, to be destroyed only 21 years later. Then it lived 50 more years under the dominion of another empire. But Poland is alive and well. And Europe is for Poland its natural and historical home. And Poland is today an active and constructive player in the European Union. Next year it will hold its first presidency of the European Union. Europe counts very much on your presidency, and the Commission will be a committed supporter of your task. So at the beginning of the 21st century, Poland is now at the heart of the European family. Let also Europe be in your hearts. Thank you very much for your attention.